Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. This is Dr. Greer, and I'm the founder of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, CSETI.org, and DisclosureProject.org. And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us here every 2 weeks to bring you up to date on all the exciting events that are happening in the disclosure world and new energy world, as well as contact. And I'm really happy to have on the show today Colin Andrews, who all of you know is a world-renowned researcher. He's an electrical engineer who back in 1983 began to look into what are now called crop circles, a term that he coined. And I met him in 1991, and ever since then we've been dear friends and very supportive of each other's work. And I have actually been many times out in the crop circles with Colin Andrews in England, and he's just been one of the real beacons of truth on a subject of enormous controversy and deception and intrigue, and so he is the person when everyone asks me about crop circles and what the heck's going on with that, I said go see what Colin Andrews is doing, because he is the man. The other thing that is exciting about Colin Andrews is that he and his wonderful wife Cynthia have come out with a book about 2012, which is really a tour de force of information on the Mayan calendar, the prophecies, the information, and really a view into the time that we're emerging into, because many people have the stereotype of sort of an apocalyptic view of 2012. In reality, it's one of the hallmarks of a transformational time of one cycle ending in another cycle, a golden age of enlightenment and world peace emerging. So Cynthia and Colin Andrews have done just a wonderful job with that. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome Colin Andrews.
Hi, Steve. It's a great pleasure to be with you again.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, would you like to sort of bring folks up to speed a little bit about what happened this year with the crop circles and the research and the new things that you're finding that I think all of us are anxious to hear about?
Certainly. Well, in 2010, just kind of dropping back 2 years briefly, I had been by then kind of quite deeply involved in you could say a separate research from the main thrust of into the crop circles themselves per se, and this was generally looking at the what was considered to be nuisance value, I think, initially, and certainly for some years it was with me too, into hoaxing people making circles, and many of them.
Right.
Well, during that that period of time, and without kind of going back in great detail, I came to respect the fact that there was a bigger part of importance going on around people making some of them than had been hitherto given reasonable attention. And so when I heard in 2010 that there was going to be a kind of a concerted effort to impress upon the public the levels of man-made, hoaxing is the general term used, but it's a little bit more complex than that.
Right.
And there was going to be an effort made into kind of setting an example of just what was going on by the people themselves who were making them in 2011. So in other words, it's a long-winded way of saying that in 2010, I became convinced that what they were telling me was going to happen in 2011
right.
was truthfully what they were going to try and demonstrate to us. And so 2011 came along, and as you know, you and I were over there in those fields and experiencing kind of both sides of the fence, you might say, those that whether they were or were not man-made, certainly demonstrated to us that there are energies associated that are tangibly felt by some people in geometries placed in plants. And so I know your people and you are very sensitive individuals who are attuned to parts of the human system that many are not. And so there we were in southern England, and as the weeks and the months passed, I got to see that a large number of them were being made, as I had been told they would be, by these individuals, and to the point where I began to receive calls ahead of time, so I really didn't need any convincing, that when I would see this pattern that I'd been forewarned about appear in a place I was told it was going to appear, this was a hoax,
right.
A design made by people.
Right.
So getting that out of the way, most of the year consisted of designs that were roughly constructed and made by people. Some certainly could not be written off as easily as that, and indeed showed none of the signs that I've gotten to find when people have made them. So there was a mix during the year. But
right.
It wasn't all happening in southern England. In January last year, in the rice paddy fields in Indonesia, a reasonably complex design for the early arrival of crop circles in any country usually starts with single, very simple designs and evolved in each country. Well, here, kind of stepping straight in, missing out phase one, as it were, was a reasonably complex design in a rice paddy field. But in Bulgaria, there they did receive a simple circle and the first ever to appear. And then, we jumped continents. There was a grape shot design in the Netherlands. In Russia, there was a number of designs. And, one can go on. In Jacksonville, sure. Illinois, in the U.S., simple single circles, actually very impressive, even though they were simple. There were the lay of the plants and the weaving that had gotten to see in the early days was all there to be seen again. A number of designs in Italy, very impressive actually, some of them extremely impressive. And your and my colleague A.J. Gavard got involved personally down in Brazil,
right.
To look at designs that, as you know, have appeared for a number of years and continue down there. So that's kind of a fairly quick overview of 2011, but there were some very odd things to talk about, which I think you and I will get to, that we experienced during the year.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, well, and during 2011, this past season, at least the ones in England, are there some in particular that you found intriguing that you felt were not hoaxes? And or do you have those on your website, or is there a way for us to, or you want to discuss any of those?
Well, they are on the website, Steve, and I will ensure as we go on air with this program that they are marked up appropriately. They are numbered. They're all there under the 2011 on colinandrews.net. I'll ensure that they're marked for those of more interest, but I think the eye of your listeners in particular will pick them out because
sure.
They are impressive. You don't have the stomper mark board marks. You don't have tracks in and out.
Right.
They're very impressive. And, some of those that have had more than a few words to say about them that are interesting in a number of ways, I can give you specific numbers here now on air. For example, if you go to that page on the website, which of course is crop circles, and then select 2011, and you'll come up to the whole page of appearances during that year. Well, if you go to, listeners go to those two designs that are photographed and appear there as number 33 and number 36, these show, both of them are double spirals, and they connect right. together. Right. They're spiraled in opposite directions. Both of them are almost identical. The only difference is there are twice as many spirals in one than the other.
Right.
These appeared in different places, one in Windmill Hill
right.
And one in Mere in Wiltshire. Sure. And this is the thing that needs to be said and heard, I think, loud and clear, because this is where I still believe this phenomenon rests, and that I know that both of those designs were designed and manufactured by two groups of individuals who were unknown to one another, that appeared the same night with the same designs, unbeknown to one another. And that might sound, very quickly as, well, what a coincidence. It's way more than that when you look at how often this happens, how often the interaction, it's just like, with your work, you flash those lights in the sky, and they react. It's where, two groups of individuals, probably consisting of at least 20 people, have had the urge to make the same designs and to place them in southern England in the same county the same night, completely without human planning. That is, the entirety of the plan was not discussed or executed with two groups. These are two groups performing, it would seem, in response to an instruction. And I might have put that differently to some other people might put that, differently. That they're simply urges, that you could say that it's in the membrane of the Akashic record. This is, in other words, what is intended to happen because we're on a path. So, that's just one of those events.
Well, that gets to the whole concept of the non-locality of the mind, which everyone on the World Puja Network understands. That's why we can talk about consciousness and transdimensional and non-locality on this show, whereas maybe you can on others. And the fact that there are these resonant fields that are within the Akashic record and within the structure of awareness that can explain how, for example, when we go out as CSETI to contact ETs that are visiting, a group of people in a circle will get the same image of the same craft at the same time in the future, say an hour later that will happen, and an hour later that object appears in that part of the sky that we had several people, not everyone, but several people had seen through the remote viewing process that we train people to do. And that's because the nature of mind is that it is not bound in space and time. It operates beyond those boundaries of space and time. And so that can happen even with people who are quote-unquote hoaxing one of these things. Now, but I guess what I'm asking you is that rather than dwelling on the ones that people made, the ones that were not evidently made by people, to discuss.
Well, I guess to discuss it's more, I think, about the what you perceive or what you feel when you're in those designs that are mysterious.
Oh yes, but I'm talking about what specific ones. I'm trying to get real specific. Which ones that you experienced or saw? I mean, there's this one that's on your front page that looks like almost like a step pyramids around the border of it, and then sort of a medallion in the center. Well, if you look at your front page, you'll see on the right it says 2011 circles, and this is one that's was not far from Silbury Hill, for example.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
If you're on your website, you can see.
Yes. Okay. I'm not on my website, but I know which one you're referring to, and that's certainly that one, and a number of others there would come very much into the realms of unknown. I mean, I spent some time there. I went with a number of individuals. The whole group experienced some level of electronic failures. This was the one, as you say, was raised up there overlooking Silbury Hill.
Unbelievable sight. Yeah, the view of Silbury Hill from there was stunning. Well,
wasn't it?
What you haven't heard, which you must hear, is that we went there and did field work in this site, our contact protocols. And when we were in this, now we had been there, this appeared, it appeared actually the day that we arrived in the area, which was strange enough. Mm-hmm. What happened then is that when we went into it, we did a puja near the center of what looks almost like a face or an egg-shaped structure in the center. Okay, so we went to the very center of it, and we had our circle of people sit in a circle in the center of the circle, and we did a puja, and it's all in Sanskrit, as everyone on the World Puja Network knows, and then we did a beautiful meditation, and we're looking, and I'm facing directly at Silbury Hill. Suddenly, and we have a photograph, there is a craft that materializes and flies into view, a disc, and we have it.
Interesting.
Then This is all going to get released this year. Then we have these devices, and you know, if you're an electrical engineer, these magnetometers that are very sensitive. And we're out in the middle of this huge field. It was a massive, huge field, away from any man-made sources whatsoever. And we had the equivalent of the Orion transmissions that we had in Joshua Tree National Park that came through these radar and laser detectors, but it was coming through a magnetometer, and it was literally like a Vedic song, and it went on for at least 45 minutes. Wow. In the center of this, and it was actually a transdimensional transmission from consciousness and these ET beings into the center of the circle through this magnetic field meter. And there were all kinds of magnetic field anomalies that continued during this couple of hours that we were in there. And there were people who were, shall we say, crop circle tourists who came by during this, and they were just gobsmacked because they could see that we had this magnetometer, no electronics around at all, and it was doing this thing that it was actually making sounds and intonations that this mechanical device cannot make if you put it near a motor or what have you. It was almost lyrical. It was emotional. It was spiritual. It's very, very hard. Now, we did record it. So, this went on for, it wasn't just a couple of blurps. This went on for a prolonged period of time after we had made contact, and at the time that we saw and photographed in one of our cameras this craft that materialized and dematerialized in the sky just above and to the north of where we were in that crop circle. So I wanted
that would be looking towards Avebury, yeah?
Yes.
From Silbury Hill, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Very interesting.
So this was a beautiful experience, and then it continued because as we visited this more than once, and then the other crop circles we were in, we had to lesser degree this happen. But then one of the most astounding things was up on Woodborough Hill, where we actually, some amazing contact happened, but when we were doing this, we had a sphere of light, large, that materialized on the edge of the hill that we have a photograph of. And we had done a puja on top of Woodborough Hill. Now, for those of you who have not been there, there's this little community called Alton Barnes, and there's Alton Priors, and it's in Wiltshire, and it's near Milk Hill and all of that. And there's this hill called Woodborough Hill, and it's surrounded by this farm that we're allowed to use each year, and that Colin introduced me to the farmer. Thank you, Colin. And we were there, and suddenly we had this, into this dimension, this craft appear and then disappear. Now, what we had been doing up there is with the puja this year, which was quite strange, usually there aren't, but there were all these cattle that were up on the hill grazing. Other years it's kind of just been a meadow. And they all came around. And as we did the puja after this contact happened, one by one, I did, because I was doing the puja and it was getting dusky, and one by one, each cow knelt down and then sat down right 3 feet from our circle and watched and listened to the puja in Sanskrit.
How bizarre. And
then the entire time we sat in meditation for an hour, they just sat there with us in meditation, these animals. It was so beautiful.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful. Well, you've mentioned both the sites, I have to say.
Yes.
The second site there, as you know better than anybody, was the site within a matter of a few hundred meters of the encounter that you had on Carson's land. When was that, Steve? Do you remember the one when we? I had just left the site. It was extraordinary.
Well,
I had the full experience.
Yes, where that was in, of course, late July of 1992, and that's when an entire extraterrestrial spacecraft fully materialized about 10 feet above the ground and floated towards us. And it was, of course, it was right at the end of when it had been raining hard and most people had left and you had left. And
that's right.
Yes, but it was absolutely stunning. And yes, and you're right. There was a crop circle very near to there.
That's right. Well, the first site that you mentioned, I have to say I also, unbeknown, as you know, this is the first time you and I have spoken since we came back from England this year. I was not aware of what you were going to be saying now on this program. I went back several times myself to the design overlooking Silbury because of events that were occurring there, and for the feeling that it gave me personally, for what I could see on the ground, that what impressed me, the first group that I went in with, Steve, there were most of them from the United States, and amongst them was a fairly elderly lady. We had to help sit down on. She wanted to sit as everybody else was, in the circle itself, facing, as you were, Silbury Hill and Avebury to the north. Wonderful sight across the English countryside there.
Yes.
And we too did a deep meditation, and it just basically went where, we were led ourselves in the meditation, nothing particularly planned. And this woman at the end of it was kind of touching the shoulder of a friend of hers who had come with her, and I could see a discussion going on. And that discussion, they suddenly both looked and said, just look what's happened here. This elderly woman, with the help of her friends simply to stand, had an experience of being able to move freely. She had had a serious back problem for many years, and she walked out of there just like a young kid. I've not experienced anything like it myself. I've heard of this before. I have not personally witnessed anything quite as extraordinary.
Yeah.
And this followed, the equipment breakdowns that we had, one after the other. It just was a crazy situation. Something else going on there, for sure. And so that was in the same design that you have just described. Overlooking the site, as we both know, where the Wiltshire police officer, still being researched today, 2 years ago, witnessed those 3 light beings, and that was in the field right below where we were.
Right, and we had those light beings with us in the field, and we have some images of them moving around us transdimensionally. Tall, luminous white. Yes, all this is going to be coming out. Now, what's one of the interesting things, you mentioned this woman who had this back issue. We were in Crestone, Colorado, and we're going to be there again in this year in June, from June 17th to the 24th. And we have a little ranch there that I have in the middle of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. And we were there a couple of years ago with a very elderly man who for 35 years had intractable back pain. And we were sitting, having contact, doing the meditation, and I was leading people in the remote viewing, and I had done a puja. And this man, nobody was particularly focusing on the fact that he just accepted it because he'd had it for 35 years, and he was a man in his, I guess, around 80 years of age. He got up. He says, "I don't have this anymore." I said, "What do you mean?" And I saw him about a year later. He still did. He had been completely, whatever blockages and pain and physical problems had caused this intractable back problem, was completely gone, vanished. Another year we had a person who had chronic, really malignant hypertension, which is a medical, where you're very high blood pressure, that even the blood pressure medicines often don't help. That person was in, and there was these energy fields around us, and was able to completely go off blood pressure medicines. And I'm speaking now as a physician, where we actually documented this. So one of the things that you find is that there is something happening that is not only on the level of the conscious mind, but that comes through all the other dimensions of the body of light and the physical body. Because what I've come to learn, and I learned this when I was 17 and had a near-death experience, is that the physical body doesn't manifest the mind, but the mind and the body of light manifest the physical body.
Yeah.
And so that's how remote healings can take place and all of this sort of thing. Well, it makes complete sense if we're dealing with civilizations and intelligences that understand the science of consciousness and understands transdimensional conscious reality, which is the whole cosmos. It's a conscious quantum hologram. It makes total sense that when these kinds of experiences are happening and people are in a deep conscious meditative state, and there is this kind of energetic field that is concentrated in a physical three-dimensional space, like a crop circle, or during a steady contact event, that there could be these corollaries within the physical body. where there are these amazingly beautiful things that happen because things come back into harmonic, things come back into balance, you see. So that's what I see happening. I'm so glad you shared this story about this elderly woman that had that happen, because we've had identical things as that happen. Not necessarily in crop circles, but just, during our contact expeditions.
Absolutely. It's fascinating to me. And, I think that you appreciate much more than most because of your medical background, your expertise. I know I've shared this with you and the CSETI audience, in Rio Rico and the last time we were together, I think.
Yes.
The experience that Cynthia and I shared during one night that we were woken, and I raised this, Steve, because of the fact that we were clearly and obviously given information in the middle of the night, both deep asleep, waking separately, moments, seconds apart, being unable to move, being absolutely paralyzed to the bed, and yet being given what I've only ever been able to describe as downloads of information pertaining to very simple geometry of an equilateral triangle. And here I was given my part of, the placement of these designs on the landscape of our planet, forming equilateral triangle, giving me information which was in front of my nose, but I hadn't actually kind of seen it, was the placement of Stonehenge in that geometry on the landscape. This was all given in a matter of moments, and as the level of connection diminished, like turning down a dimmer switch, that connection, which was so obviously different to the norm, suddenly it's beginning to fade away, and then I could move again. And I looked at Cynthia, and she was just staring into the room, onto the ceiling of the room, still laid in bed, unable to move, as I had been. And now she is given, this is the reason I really particularly raised this, she is now given the same information related to an equilateral triangle and the ratios of places within it pertaining to the chakra points of the human body for healing. And so this kind of speaks to exactly what you've said, and as it left her, that experience left her, she looked at me, I'm staring at her, she said, what just happened? And I said, what happened to you? And she said there was this triangle, and it was like, oh my God, that's what I've just had too. And of course we clicked the switch on for the light switch. We sat there bewildered and made full notes. But she is still working with that now, trying to utilize what she believes she was given and why she was given it. And it fits right precisely to what you've said, is that this is knowledge. I don't know whether it's something we're supposed to know, whether it's something that we've lost along the way, whether this is part of the transition into a new period of time when we are intended to know this and will know it one way or another. But it's fascinating stuff.
Well, I think it's all of the above, and actually, during the CSETI conference when that was happening, as you know, if you go back to the origins of CSETI, and people go to cseti.org, they'll see this. There's a photograph on that site of an equilateral triangle crop circle that happened at Oliver's Castle back in 1992. And the way that came about was that we were at Woodborough Hill, and there were about a dozen of us. And
place again.
Yes, and we went up there, and no one on planet Earth knew, and we didn't know as a group even before we went up on the hill that very, very night. And we were wanting to communicate with the intelligences making the authentic crop circles. And, there had already been the Barbary Castle and other circles that had a equilateral triangle motif or leitmotif that kind of went through. But we went up there, but we didn't know, and we were sitting in a circle, and we were going to go into our deep meditation using the Vedic meditation, and then once we got into unbounded quiet mind, we were going to transmit to the crop circle makers into the ether of unbounded mind, as it were, a shape that we were going to ask the crop circle makers to make. And we decided on a simple equilateral triangle, 3 circles connected by lines. And do you know that very night, within line sight of where we were there, that what we now call the C-SETI triangles, become our logo, appeared in a field, and a farmer discovered it in the wee hours of the morning when he was going to go out and begin harvesting in an adjacent field. And when we went up to Oliver's Castle and looked down on it, it was as if the cosmic mind and these ET intelligences had picked that up out of our mind and laid it in the field perfectly. And no one, I mean, we were up there doing our contact protocols, sent out this image, and all went to bed. No one knew about it. The next morning, I mean, well, within not even the next morning, because he was out at 4 or 5 in the morning, and we had left our site probably at 1 in the morning. And there it was. And when they did the studies on that particular crop circle, they had found all kinds of electromagnetic anomalies in the cell walls and what have you. But what was interesting is that same motif continued when we decided to move here to Virginia. We were debating, where should we move? And I want to be out in the country where it's very pure and this and that. And we came up here to look at a house that's on, and where I am speaking from right now is not too far from Thomas Jefferson's home. And I have to explain, a lot of people don't know who Thomas Jefferson was. He wrote the Declaration of Independence, and people say, oh, well, everyone knows that. I said, no, they don't. I mean, I talk about this all the time. Nobody knows who he is anymore. So anyway, but there's a man who, of course, founded the country and wrote the Declaration of Independence, and his estate is just east of me, about 20 minutes. And we were looking at this farm, and the man who was showing us the property, his family is a big landowner around here, and it's the Faulkner family. And he showed us this property. I was debating whether to move here, whether to get this property or not. And do you know the very day that my wife and I decided to get this property, which has about 65 acres, and which in line sight of Swannanoa, where Walter Russell did the Universal One, by the way, we're 10 minutes from there. That very day that we made that decision, that crop circle appeared. That is an equilateral triangle on the land of the man who sold us this property.
Oh, my.
And I didn't know about it. It was on the front cover of the Charlottesville Weekly paper, Virginia paper. And, I mean, no one in the world, no one but my wife and I knew that we were even looking up here to move. So you have to understand that these beings and this level of intelligence that's interfacing with this dimension and this world operates in ways that the Vedic masters understand, and people who have the Puja network, or everyone listening who understands consciousness understand. But to the average linear reductionist person, it just seems impossible. And yet the impossible has now become the everyday. And see, what I see happening into the future is that the things that we consider the impossible and the miraculous and the absolutely unattainable will be the manifest and the obvious and the everyday.
I believe that. I absolutely do, and it can be very personal, can't it? I mean, as you said, there was a design like, well, here you are. Does this make you feel at home? Does this kind of confirm that that's your house? You know, it can be very personal. You know, and I think it's absolutely appropriate time, Steve, if I may. This I know you are unaware of completely. Before we came on air, I was trying to finalize some information and vouch for its authenticity, its correctness in as far as data was concerned before I said anything for this program, because just a few hours ago, I received an email from, and I've been told that I can say this on air. I hadn't the permission up to a few moments before we connected, from Annie Haslam. She's a very famous singer, Annie Haslam of the Renaissance, British pop group, the Renaissance, right. From the 60s, 70s, and they're still doing out their gigs today. Annie took a photograph of what was the transition from heavy rain into snow on the 31st of October last year. She'd not looked at the photographs until a few hours ago and was astounded by what was in one of them, looking out into her back garden. Well, she sent me the photograph in high resolution. I've not seen anything like it in my life. We've tried to eliminate in these first few hours, the obvious questions of reflectivity in the glass. Was there anything in the room that could have kind of reflected on the glass like this, etc.? All of the obvious things appear to have been eliminated. I've just forwarded a copy of it to Bruce Maccabee, who's looking at it as we speak. And there are now measurements being taken in the backyard of this house in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, to try and get the angles established. But the focus of these two gold-colored discs that are hovering about, I would say, about 7 or 8 feet off of her backyard, are bathing the plants in golden light. I mean, this is, you look at the material, you look at the quality of the light, and you say straight away, this is gold. I mean, there is no other way of looking at these objects and not believing that that's what it is you're looking at.
Right.
There's raised portions on the top of the domes, which I'll have on the website and will forward to you the moment I'm cleared by her to do so. For the listeners to look at. But I think this is going to be a very important photograph, Steve. I've not seen anything like it, and Bruce came back very tentatively a few moments ago, just before we came on air, and he too is very excited by this. So anyway, I thought to break that to you because the second sentence in my email in response to this photograph to Annie was that I'll be on the air with Dr. Stephen Greer within the hour, it's like, well, here's another gift for who better to show something of this kind to would be yourself, the very guy, the very center of the biggest investigation into this subject that we've ever undertaken, I think. And so there you go. I said I would convey it to you.
Well, thank you. That's so exciting. Well, it reminds me, if you have, of course, if you look at one of our early books, Extraterrestrial Contact, the Evidence and Implications, that came out about 10 years ago, there's a picture of a disc, a golden disc like that over Vancouver Island, British Columbia, that's been analyzed by NASA, by everybody, and it's in broad daylight. And then the pièce de résistance is what happened about 6 months ago. And we were in Crestone, Colorado, doing one of our contact expeditions. And we had somebody with a very excellent, I think it's a 25-megapixel Nikon camera. And we had set up to do the Puja, and I had walked over, and you had met Sherry Adamak, who helped us for years and then was murdered by this cabal who killed Bill Colby and killed her, tried to kill me. A whole bunch of people almost died within a very short period of time. I was the only one that survived. And what happened, we were by the tree where we had placed Sherry's ashes that's on the land I own in Crestone, Colorado. And it's now a very sacred place for us. We go there every year with our team. And those of you who are interested in joining us can go to cseti.org and see the dates and where it is. We're there, and then straight ahead of us, due east, is the only authentic Tibetan stupa in the West that the Dalai Lama asked our friend and CSETI supporter, Ambassador Jim George of Canada, to build there, which is in direct line sight. Now, the stream that comes down by this Tibetan stupa comes right through the middle of my land. And between Sherry's tree and where this stream is, which is all very sacred energy, I'm walking out there making, it looks like a equilateral triangle, like Cynthia, like your wife got, where with my mind and my two palms out, I make a triangle, and I'm going out making contact and inviting the beings in. And this man is taking photographs. And over between where we are at Sherry's tree, where her ashes are scattered, and this sacred, they call it Magic Creek in that part of the world because it has so many, is this pure golden disc, literally 3 feet above the ground.
How large
in the
did
photograph,
you say it was, Steve? That's extraordinary. I didn't know about that.
Well, there's a whole, we haven't, we're pulled in so many directions. What we're going to be doing, and one of the things I'm announcing today, because this is 2012, is that we have decided, I can't say that we've inked it yet, but there is an Emmy award-winning documentary filmmaker who wants to team up with us and put together a documentary that has all of this information in it, as well as dozens of people who the public have never heard from. A lot of people don't realize they go to disclosureproject.org, and as everyone knows, about 10 years ago we did the big National Press Club event. We have only had the funds to release and even edit a fraction of what we have. We have over 110 hours of whistleblower top secret testimony and documents, and now all this photograph. We're going to put all that together with this Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker is what we're planning to do this year. And we're going to stream it live. We're going to do a National Press Club event. We're going to put it on the Internet. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be everywhere. No charge for it. We're just going to stream it live, and we intend to have 2 or 3 billion people see it because it's going to have the most amazing material on it. This is what we hope to do. Now, hopefully we can get this done. And anyone who has really important evidence, like you just mentioned from this lady who sent you this image, we want to put the absolute best of the best of the best of not only the testimony, the government officials, but also the physical evidence and photographic evidence of all of this into this that the whole world can see. And our intent is to do it, and we're also planning to then do a series of global premieres where we go throughout the world to show this and discuss it so that everyone knows that we have got to close out this one era of division and, ethnic strife and religious strife and nonsense and open up a new era, a golden era of world peace, interstellar peace, and contact, because this is happening. And the public has got to know. So it's not only going to cover things like we did in Disclosure Project, it's going to cover all of this contact information as well as the technologies and the new energy. It's all going to be in this. We're planning on a 2-hour documentary that'll do this. In the meanwhile, and luckily we have had a generous contribution that we can do this so that it can all just be completely, you won't even have to pay for the DVD to see it or to buy it. It'll just be there. Anyone can download it and look at it.
That's wonderful.
And that's what we're going to do because we have all this. We, of course, my wife and I and a couple other volunteers have been trying to struggle to do this for, as you know, for 2 decades. We're now going to do this where we have the means to have it done professionally and also have it and it'll be, I think, very, very exciting. And so we're planning to do that. And these expeditions this year are going to be astonishing, I believe, because this is the year of the pivotal point where we must move into an entirely new civilization and sort of shed the old skin of the old one, the closing of that old era. Now, most people look at 2012 in sort of these sort of Hollywood stereotypical apocalyptic terms, but I always say, well, it depends on what you're attached to. If you're attached to the old structures, it is apocalyptic. But if you're looking at what's emerging, not going to emerge, but it's actually manifesting right now all around us, even in your friend's backyard there in Pennsylvania during the snowstorm. This is emerging around us all the time, and it's beautiful, and it's spiritual, and it's physical, and it's every dimension pulled together. And that's what people need to understand. It's not this or that, it's all of it. And very exciting.
It absolutely is, and that's wonderfully put too. I don't think there's any question that anybody who's deeply involved in these gambit of research efforts know that something very profound is happening. There is nobody that can get away from turning your television on and off within 10 minutes that wouldn't know that we're seeing something very different transpiring here. When Cynthia and I were researching it was about 6 or 7 months solid research, nothing else, looking at the 2012 prophecy,
right.
The Complete Idiot's Guide series, the only instruction we were given is that they really didn't want all of this blackness, all of this, the movie that had already kind of,
right.
Oh my goodness me, frightening everybody to death.
Right.
But they did want the truth. They wanted it thoroughly researched and investigated. So we engaged a big effort, and we spoke to NASA people on the technical side of the astronomy rather. I engaged personally, a former FBI anti-terrorist agent, Alan Huimet, I can now say, who is a very odd combination of FBI anti-terrorism and astrologer, a really strange combination.
Yeah.
But he was looking at that. You know, we were looking at all kinds of areas of expertise and came to see there is no question that this is a decoupling, and this I think is good. Of course, some people see it as not good, but you know, if you look at the logical progression of a decoupling of the systems that had to decouple to introduce an entirely new era, then that's what had to happen. And the Mayans saw it coming. This is what we've got. You could run through the Earth changes, you know, and we can put headlines on each one of these that kind of make the point with Japan, largest earthquake in living memory, as far as the scale of it was concerned, and all of the changes and horrible ones at that came with it. But these are earth changes. We're looking at religious and political stress, tensions that are building and must build because we have to get some common sense into this. You know, truth will take us to a better place, and out of that combination of religion and politics needs to sort itself out. So, you know, obviously, as we know, we're looking at the the Wall Street Occupy movement, Arab Spring. These are obviously signs of the tensions that are building. They're not going away. Governments knew they were coming. They've planned for them and trying to deal. They're trying to think. I think they're still trying to get a foothold on how they can regulate or control and manipulate ultimately what's happening with the population. But at this time, they're unable to find it. There's nothing making sense as far as old politics and political ways are concerned. It isn't happening. So, but it's because it's something new. You know, so you've got that, and you can run down through the list of trend lines, Steve. You know, with the population now has already exceeded the 7 billion. You know, so we're moving on in that direction. So where something has to give, and it will. You know, something better will come out of it. Climate change, we've mentioned. Human health is something you're very conversant with. New viruses, etc., that were part of an equation. The economy, well, that speaks for itself. Just look at it. Europe and the United States. It's an absolute shambles. All the lies and greed that were part of bringing it this way. You know, and so one can go on. Global warming.
Well, and if you look at all of it, it's all because it's been built on a foundation of us versus them, divisiveness, greed, and all the lower chakras, the lower energies, and that all of that is basically imploding upon itself. And you know, so I tell people, yes, you can focus on that. I think what's really important and exciting is to focus on what are we going to create in its place. It's the phoenix from the ashes. So I tell people, yes, you can dwell on all that. What's important is to say, yes, that is inevitable because the foundations are so lamentably defective and corrupt and moribund that it just can't hold any further. However, and this is what's key, is that from higher consciousness and from higher dimensions and even from other interstellar systems, there is knowledge and information and contact and even science and technology that are here. They're not coming. They are already here, and they have been bottled up because folks who want to maintain the status quo don't want to see this big change. I mean, let's consider the fact that T. Townsend Brown and Tesla and others had anti-gravity and new energy things back 50 to 100 years ago. Here we still are fighting over oil, about ready to go to war with Iran over closing the Straits of Hormuz. Yeah. So the thing is that, you know, it's like the old Chinese saying, unless we change directions, we're likely to end up where we're going. So, you know, that direction can lead to where it's leading. But what we have to visualize is that is going to give way and has to give way to a new time, a golden era that it isn't going to come through a Ouija board. It's going to come through efforts of we, the people, coming together. Because let's face it,
I quite agree.
The vast majority of the public are not invested in traditional ethnic and religious strife or traditional economic systems where Goldman Sachs and a handful of other corporations rule the roost, and where 7 billion people 2.8 billion people don't even have plumbing or toilets or anything. This is not a system that the vast majority of humans, who are for the most part kind and want to just go forward, care about. So the reality is, and this is why we view this, we're all in 2012. The CSETI and Disclosure Project are going to go full bore on this. Now, we expect the attacks on us to increase, because in the last year, 6 months to a year, both federal attacks, federal government attacks, all kinds of attacks have happened on us, hacking, you name it, death threats, stalking. There's an FBI file open now because of the death threats and stalking I've had. But the fact is, that you're going to expect, but you have to go all in right now, because this is not the time to hold back, my friends, people who are listening. We have to go all in, and that's what we're going to do with the release of all this information, streaming everything, things that didn't even exist 3 to 5 years ago that we can do now, where we can reach through a YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and the Internet and other sites, untold numbers of people with all this information now that we have the means. And particularly someone, because frankly, you don't want me editing anything. I'm I'm not technically oriented, to say the least. But now that we have the attention and interest of an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and documentary, I think what we can do is put things together, because we have so much material, in a way that will be pivotal going forward in 2012 into the years that follow. And also our contact expeditions, we're going to be, those of you who want to come, you're invited to join us on Marco Island in Florida in the Gulf of Mexico. Last year when we were there, we're going to be there in April this year, and we have a park that's a state park that we have reserved only for our use at night. It's fantastic. When we were there last year, we have a videotape that is of literally dozens of transdimensional objects that are bleeding into this dimension that are literally 100 to 200 yards from us. It goes on for 3.5 hours.
My goodness.
You cannot believe this. When we can get this, it is unbelievable. Everyone who was there, so we're going to do this again. We're going to be at the same place. Those who want to join us on this expedition, the information is at cseti.org. And it's limited to a small number, about 20 people. But what's exciting about it is that this was coming from out over the Gulf of Mexico. And when this contact happened was literally within minutes after we did a puja in the center of the circle, and we were honoring all the ascended masters and honoring all of our ancestors who passed over into the worlds of light, and asking them to help us make this transition into this new time. And within minutes of that puja ending, literally within minutes, and through the night scope binoculars, you can't believe, but even with the naked eye, dozens of these objects. And it wasn't like a structured craft. It was more beautiful than that. It wasn't one, and the area that it was emerging from was probably about 3 to 5 miles across. So there was this energy field that came in out from over the Gulf of Mexico that was transdimensional, and then into our dimension are all these brilliant white objects that are coming down to the sand, down over the mangroves, over the lagoon right in front of us, and it's on film. You absolutely cannot believe this. So this is what's happening, and this story has got to be told by someone who's a better film person than I am. But, at a certain point, we're not only going to make this, but we're going to just start streaming stuff onto YouTube. But see, right now we don't have anyone. We're going to actually try to get someone who can do this almost full-time, who does nothing but get this stuff out there in a constant barrage of information, evidence, witness testimony that just won't stop unless they take down the Internet. They'll have to take down the Internet.
Yeah, I think they're trying to do that too, aren't they?
Yeah, oh yes, that's what this new bill is about. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, as we speak, Wikipedia and others have come offline to protest that.
Correct.
But I think what you're doing is absolutely right. No more time, as we said the last time we were together, for sitting on the fence. There's no more time to be gray and woolly. This is black or white. This is it. This is the time. If we're to focus upon and to mature the coherence of respect and compassion for one another, then we've got some ground to make up. As we know, I mean, if we were to look at the period of your work, the period of my work, and many others, what's it been telling us? I think it's been highlighting and exposing the devious nature of a large segment of society, of which, the results, what we see today, it's leading us by the nose through a transitional period towards truth. Right. There is no guarantee, though, Steve, that we have learned or that we will change, but it offers us truth from which we can choose to do so. And so this is it. This is the moment. You know where you are in this and how solid it is. I've gotten to, to focus now upon where I believe that matters on my part of the equation, which is human consciousness and the interaction of a higher mind with humanity. And let's go for it. We've still negative entities that are here on our planet in good numbers, and let them know the battle is on.
Right, absolutely, and that ultimately it's a lot of people have to. We need not just an Arab Spring or this spring or Wall Street. We need a global spring. So this is the global spring. The dawn's already happened. We're out of winter. This is the global springtime, and so this is what we have to potentiate in 2012. And would you like to share with people how they might get hold of you? I know you have a website.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, they can certainly come in through the website, and, a contact button comes right to my desk, so anything and everything on those contact buttons does reach me, and I read it and I respond. So it's colinandrews.net, and the sections there on the work that's being done with consciousness, the crop circles, UFO, and a number of other topics which I believe are connected.
And your 2012, I think the 2012 book was also mentioned on that side. Yes.
Yes, it is. Thank you. That's one of the newer books, 2012. That's the Complete Idiot's Guide to 2012, which really and truly is now coming into its end, not just simply because it is 2012, but it was actually published 2 years ago, and the trend lines and the information that was then prophecy, which is now fact, I think is impressive in of itself, if we may say so ourselves.
Yes,
but it's not our prophecy. It's the science and it's the Mayan, and these were scholars, and their work is now coming to be seen for what it is.
Well, and for those who are interested in these contact expeditions with me, you can find out more at cseti.org. And also the information for disclosure and ending secrecy on all of this at disclosureproject.org. And Colin, I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your time with us this hour on the World Puja Network.
That's my pleasure, Steve.
And I'd like to thank all the folks at the World Puja Network for giving us this time to give you our perspective and information and news of what's happening in this subject. So keep looking up, and it's an exciting year, and God bless all of you. Bye-bye.